Hello, I'm Wendell Ray, and welcome to UWO Now. We're glad to have you for another conversation with a member of our UWO community. Each year, the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh recognizes outstanding alumni for achievement in their careers and their civic involvement. The Alumni Awards Banquet will be Friday, October 18th, part of homecoming weekend festivities and events here on campus. For information, contact the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Alumni Relations Office. Caitlin Hopper is one of this year's Outstanding Young Alumni Award recipients. And Caitlin joins us today. From where are you joining us, Caitlin?
I am calling in from Washington, D.C., where I have lived and worked for about 8 years now.
I ask you that because you could literally be anywhere in the world due to your job responsibilities. And we'll get to that in a second, but let's trace your academic path, first of all. Let's talk about Caitlin in high school. What got you to UWO?
Yeah, so I was a very precocious young person, I would say. And I chose UWO for my continuing academic path because I was convinced from a very young age that I wanted to become a nurse. And UWO, of course, has an excellent nursing program, which drew me to it at first. But obviously, that's not the path that I ended up going down. So I chose the school for reasons that didn't end up applying directly to my future, but of course, UWO launched me into a career and a life path that I adore and I'm very grateful for.
And then you left UWO, and tell us about what happened once you left UWO.
I knew that I wanted to move um, either to Washington, D.C., or maybe to New York, or maybe abroad. I hadn't really made that decision yet, but I had a good group of friends who had already kind of established themselves here in DC. And there were lots of opportunities in DC that aligned with my career interests. So I packed up my bags without much of a plan. I came out here and moved to Washington, D.C. I worked in a doggy daycare for a couple of months while I was applying to more jobs that are more oriented to the career path that I wanted to take. Not to say that doggy daycare can't be a career, but it wasn't the career that I wanted.
Right.
So I moved out here and I started applying anywhere I could, and I got my foot in the door at an institute that I had never heard of, but ended up changing my life. It was the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI for short, because it's quite a mouthful. I started there in October of 2016, and I stayed there until March of last year, and I learned a lot of important skills, especially office job skills, and I had the opportunity to travel. I was working with our board of directors, and it kind of introduced me to a job path that I didn't really know about until I was in it, which is kind of corporate governance and board of directors relations. And now I work at the World Resources Institute with our board of directors, and I couldn't be happier. And it's a job I never knew existed until I moved here and started throwing out applications wherever I could.
I'm Wendell Ray, and we're talking with Outstanding Young Alumni Award recipient Caitlin Hopper about her fascinating work, her career path, and how she got to UWO and what happened once she graduated. She's now speaking to us from Washington, D.C., where she lives and works. Now, tell us a little bit more about what happens at the World Resource Institute.
Yeah, so WRI is a very large institute. We deal with a lot of different things, but essentially we are trying to find sustainable solutions that work for people, nature, and climate, meaning that we want to help the world really transition to more sustainable practices and make sure that we are good stewards of the resources that we have, and we search for new resources to sustain livelihoods. So it surrounds, as I said, the three kind of pillars are people, nature, and climate. So we want to make sure that these transitions work for people, that they're sustainable and healthy livelihoods and job options for everyone. And we work for nature to ensure that we continue protecting biodiversity and our natural resources. And of course, climate is at the center of our work as well, trying to make sure that we impact the climate as little as possible. And that work can range anywhere from working with governments to implement electric school bus programs here in the U.S., to mangrove restoration work across a lot of different geographies, really. It's a wide range of things that we do because there's a wide range of resources available to us. And I work specifically in the corporate governance, so I work directly with the board of directors, who are very important movers and shakers in this field. And I work with them to make sure that we get the advice that we need from them, and to make sure that we as an institute continue functioning legally, for lack of a better word, to make sure that we're kind of crossing our governance T's and dotting our legal I's.
Now, what this organization, the World Resources Institute, is it made up of just Americans, or is this an international organization?
No, we are very international. So we have I think we're at about 2,000 employees now across the entire globe. We have a wide variety of offices in every, well, I almost said every geography, but every geography where people live. We don't have anyone in Antarctica, as far as I know. So we have offices across Latin America, across Africa. We have Europe, Asia. We're everywhere.
Well, what fascinates you about this type of work? What interests you about working internationally and doing these types of endeavors?
Yeah, so this was something that I hadn't really thought about until I joined the Model UN team. You know, I feel like everyone kind of has that vague sense of I want to do good in the world, and you just have to find the particular brand of good that you are best at. And I think that through Model UN and through learning about global issues, it definitely drew me to a more international work environment, certainly. And I also, sustainability and making sure that our systems work for people is very important to me. So this is just kind of this is kind of a boring answer, but this is where life has led me, and I found that I'm good at it and I like it. And I wasn't expecting to be here. Like I said, I entered UWO as a nursing major, and because that was the particular brand of good that I wanted to do at the time. And now I'm doing a different good somewhere else, and I'm loving it.
You're listening to UWO Now. I'm your host, Wendell Ray, and we're talking with Caitlin Hopper, who will be recognized as one of UWO's outstanding young alumni. We'll be back with more of our conversation in just a minute. And welcome back to UWO Now. I'm your host, Wendell Ray. We're talking today with Caitlin Hopper, who will be recognized on October the 18th at the UWO Alumni Awards Banquet as one of our outstanding young alumni. What does it mean to you, Caitlin, to be recognized by UWO?
Well, I mean, this is huge for me. It's incredibly humbling to be recognized for this award. And when I was told that I was nominated, I was incredibly flattered and just so, gosh, it really meant a lot to me to be nominated for this award and to have many people be willing to speak on my behalf. And coming home to UWO, literally during homecoming, I cannot wait for it. I had so many great years at UWO, and I don't get back there enough. So I'm happy that this is both a kind of a celebration of work and also a great excuse to go back to my old stomping grounds and see a lot of my old friends. And like I said before, I didn't expect to be on this career path or to be doing the things that I'm doing. So to be recognized so greatly for something that was not expecting to do really means a lot to me, because it helps prove to myself that I'm doing the right thing.
You're listening to UWO Now. I'm Wendell Ray, and we're talking with Alan Freitag, who is one of UWO's distinguished alumni and will be recognized so this year. You had a career in the military, in the Air Force, and I'm going to read some things from your bio just to give our folks an understanding of some of the things you did and where you were. It included nearly 10 years in Europe, 4 years in the Pentagon, and 2 years in Hawaii. You were Director of Media Relations and Press Aide to the Supreme Allied Commander for NATO's military arm headquartered in Belgium. Assistant Director of Public Affairs for the Air Force's Pacific Command, He had direct public affairs involvement in the resettlement of Vietnamese refugees, as you just mentioned, in 1975. The return of the U.S. hostages from Iran in 1981, the raid on Libyan terrorist facilities in 1986, the invasion of Panama in 1989. You were closely involved with alliance media activities surrounding the reunification of Germany, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, the opening of NATO to Eastern Europe, the conventional forces in Europe Treaty, and NATO's involvement in the First Gulf War. Wow, that is a lot. Tell me, how did all that shape your life? Tell me about your experience and what exactly you did is in terms of public relations with the Air Force.
A lot of that involved media relations that you just described. For example, the return of the Iran hostages. I set up the Media Relations Center. It was an interesting time. It was in January of '81, just the week before President Reagan's first inauguration. And the Iran hostages, these were U.S. hostages, 52 of them, who had been taken captive in 1979 when the Shah of Iran fell and Ayatollah Khomeini became the dictator of Iran. And he held those hostages for more than a year. There was an unfortunate attempt to rescue them under President Carter called Desert One, and it ended up in the collision between a C-130 and I think a Marine Corps or Army helicopter. I lost 2 friends on that C-130, but the hostages were finally released the day of or the day following the Reagan inauguration, and I was stationed in Frankfurt, Germany. Another side story, with the American Forces Network, radio and television, in Germany. So I used my MATC and UWO-Oshkosh degrees as on the management staff of a network of 10 AM, 5 AM, and 5 TV stations serving about 500,000 U.S. Americans, service members and their families posted in Europe. It was quite an operation. But I was pulled in to set up the media center for the return of the hostages. The first place they would land after departing Iran would be at Rhein-Main Air Base, which is shares runways and taxiways with the Frankfurt am Main, the big city of Frankfurt in Germany, with the airport. So we weren't sure when the hostages would be released. As it transpired, it took about a week from the initial announcement, and journalists kept coming to Frankfurt, to the airport. And by the time the hostages arrived on a U.S. Air Force C-9 Nightingale, aeromedical evacuation, basically a flying hospital, by the time they arrived, there were more than 1,500 journalists, all looking for stories, what to cover. And there were a lot of journalists who really had no business there. They had no background, no understanding. And I was trying to feed them stories. For example, there'd be a TV crew from Philadelphia. So I'd go find an Air Force sergeant or something from Philadelphia, so that we'd put them together and they could do some local color, that sort of thing. Or we gave them the history of the C9 Nightingale and what its mission is, medical evacuation, or the history of the base. It was established in the early 20th century. It's where the Hindenburg departed from, that crashed in New Jersey famously. It was a Nazi Air Force base during World War II. And then the Allies took it over following in the 1950s, I believe. So we were just trying to provide stories to 1,500 journalists who had nothing to talk about until the hostages were released. And when they arrived, and you've probably seen the picture of the hostages stepping off the airplane, walking down the stairs wearing their parkas and waving. I was there. I set that up, and so that's just an example of having been in a particular place at a particular time, and I had a skill set that was useful, and I was able to put it to good purpose. And I thought I understood the profession and practiced it at very high levels. But when I was with NATO, and I started working because we were opening to Central and Eastern Europe. And I started working with journalists from Romania and Bulgaria and Hungary, and even with some NATO members, Turkey, for example, or Greece or Spain. And what I thought I knew about public relations simply wasn't working in those circumstances. The principles that I thought were universal were not universal. How people communicate, how we encode, transmit, and decode information. And so I thought there's something going on here. There's something peculiar about the complexities of cross-cultural communication across borders and even within borders. So I said, when I retire from the Air Force, I'm going to earn a PhD and learn about this. I'm going to learn about cross-cultural international communication, apply it to professional settings in public relations, diplomatic, business settings, NGOs. And then I'm going to teach and prepare people to deal in that environment. And so that's what led me to pursue an academic career and build a program at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in global public relations. And I'll put a plug in right here. It won't do me any good.
That's
but we
all
did
right.
a lot of things. I wrote the book on global public relations, spanning borders, spanning cultures. Very successful book. It's dated now. You can get it used on Amazon for about $10. So knock yourself out.
But like your mentor, you helped build a department. At this time, like Doc Snyder here, building the RTF program at UWO, you built that global public relations department at UN Charlotte, right?
He was my role model. I tried to follow everything I thought that he would do if had he been in the same position. And by a curious coincidence, one of my colleagues that we hired after I had been there and built up the program successfully with an international certificate in international public relations. We developed the Center for Global Public Relations. I taught developed a course in international public relations that I taught on campus and in London. I would take 20 students each year for 4 weeks to London, and we'd study it. But because we had built such a prominent profile, we were able to hire one of the top scholars in international public relations by the name of Dr. Dean Krukeberg. I hired him away from Iowa. And it wasn't until he got there that I started looking at his background, that he had earned his bachelor's degree at Wartburg College, like Doc Snyder. He had earned his PhD from Iowa, like Doc Snyder. And when I mentioned Doc Snyder, he said, "Oh, I know him. I did a lengthy interview with him as a distinguished alum from Wartburg College when Dean Krukeberg was writing for the student newspaper as a student. He knew Doc Snyder." So it all came together, and I'm very touched that you would even suggest that there was a comparison there. Yes, but Doc Snyder was my role model. The UW-Oshkosh radio TV film. I said, that's what I'm going to do, but for global public relations at UNC Charlotte.
Each year, the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh recognizes outstanding alumni for achievement in their careers and their civic involvement. The Alumni Awards Banquet will be Friday, October 18th, part of homecoming weekend festivities here on campus. For more information, contact the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Alumni Relations Office. Zoe Dawes is one of this year's outstanding young alumni recipients, and she joins us today all the way from Vienna, Austria. Yes, thanks so much, Zoe, for being with us here today on UWO Now. Before we trace your career path here at that you have, let's talk about Zoe at UWO. Why did you decide to come to UWO?
I'll be honest, when I was leaving high school, I was feeling pretty lost. I knew that I wanted to go to university. I wasn't sure how far I wanted to go. I'm really close with my family. So UW Oshkosh was one of maybe 5 schools that I had applied to. And my mother took me on a visit, and it was the most beautiful snowy day. We were driving north on the highway, and we saw deer. It was magical, and we finally got to Oshkosh, and everybody was so welcoming and kind. We visited Black Hawk, and I was like, wow, this is I could eat like this forever. And yeah, from there, actually, UW Oshkosh is the only school that they reached out to me personally through Instagram when I got accepted, and they made a post about me getting accepted. And I thought that that was personal and unique. And it made me feel like I was already a part of the UW Oshkosh family. And from there, I was like, it was not even 2 hours away from my hometown. So it's far enough, but not too far. So it seemed really like the perfect choice for me.
You went on to earn a dual Bachelor of Science degrees in International Studies and Political Science. You were also a student leader in a few organizations and participated in UWO's Model UN program. Tell us about your experience here as a student at UWO. We know what intrigued you and what got you here, but tell us about your experience while you were a student here.
Until I have this job, I never left the United States. So learning about the world really fascinated me in both the political science department and international relations. And really, Model UN was where I really thrived. As you mentioned, I was a student leader for a few years. I did spend 5 years at UWO, and 3 of those years I was on the executive board, including the presidency of the Model UN team. And I just have to say, during my time on the team, we won the most awards ever. It was really challenging in a great way, personally and professionally. And it really is the only reason that I am where I am today. So I really have to thank UWO and my experience for that.
You jumped right from Wisconsin to Vienna. Man, okay. What was that transition like for a young Midwesterner?
It was so hard. And I pack up everything and I moved here. And thankfully, Vienna is it's actually voted the #1 city in the world to live. It's a very convenient city. The transportation is amazing. This was actually why I had my first breakdown and cry. Because as you know, in the Midwest, we don't have so much public transportation. I mean, it's completely different here. Everything is public transportation. So I couldn't figure it out. This was very hard. I would go to the grocery store and everything is not in my language. So trying to figure out like simple things like milk, like for example, one time I accidentally bought like some cream instead. So it's like your whole life is tossed upside down. And on Sundays in Austria, everything is closed. There is one grocery store open. And I'm not sure how you feel, but for me in Wisconsin on Sunday, this is like our major shopping preparation for the weekday. So there were so many things to get used to logistically, and then also professionally, getting into a multicultural work environment, which I think is really the best part about my job. But at the beginning, like understanding different cultures and work styles was very different. And I made some friends outside of my job because I lived in a student housing building, and we speak different English. A lot of the Europeans are learning British English, and sometimes I would take offense to simple phrases that were not offensive when they are saying it, but maybe offensive to me. So,
Hats off to you for making that transition on your own without, anyone holding your hand. Let me list some of the things that you've done. You have been the co-author of the first International Atomic Energy Association Technical Cooperation dual language publication that was in Arabic and English. You're a main coordinator of the development and publication of 2 social and economic impact assessments on radiotherapy and non-destructive testing. You represented the Nuclear Energy Agency at the 2023 European Nuclear Young Generation Forum in Krakow, Poland, and you were co-moderator and keynote speaker at the European Nuclear Education Network, and you found time also to volunteer to be a panelist and answer questions from students in Asia and the Pacific on how to build a career in the nuclear sector. So hats off to you again for your achievements. You really have had an interest in this area for some time. It wasn't like you just jumped in and said, oh, well, let me start doing this. What was it initially about this area that interested you?
Yeah, so taking it back to University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, my first year in the Model United Nations team, I was assigned to represent an Asian country, Brunei Darussalam. And the topic that I was researching and competing for was the peaceful uses of nuclear energy as a delegate in the International Atomic Energy Agency. So really full circle, this was my first experience in Model United Nations, and now I am working this department working with that country because it's in Asia. So for me, it's really crazy how this has really come from full circle. But this was the first time that I ever even considered researching or thinking about nuclear energy. Of course, I'm not a scientific expert in any way. I'm a political scientist and international relations. So I'm really coming at this from the policy social science side, which is very important in addition to the scientific and technical aspects as well. But this is really or for me to understand that this organization even existed.
Well, it's been really great to meet you and a really fantastic opportunity to get to talk to you, really honestly, considering the important work that you're doing and where you're doing it. You really are representing the university very proudly. And thanks so much for taking time today to speak with us on UWO Now.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to UWO Now. Remember to catch the latest episode of UWO Now. Go to our website, wrst.org, or you certainly can watch us on the university's YouTube page. That's all for today. Thanks so much for listening.